Thanks for checking out this movie review video. This is for the 2024 release New Life, and I gotta say, I quite like this film. The reason I've come across some films that I've been reviewing that you may not have heard of is I go to Rotten Tomatoes and I look up what new films are hitting Fandango at home, and then I've just been renting the ones that are looking more interesting to me or I've heard a little bit about, or they also have ratings on there, obviously, for, the critics versus the audience and seeing what looks like people are kind of liking and check that out. So this was one of those films and it paid off for me big time. I really did enjoy this. So New Life, written and directed by John Rosman, who this is their first feature film, which is pretty impressive, honestly, for a first feature film. Obviously, I watched this through Fandango at Home, previously known as Vudu. $5.29 for the rental, and that's including tax, obviously. So very cheap, 100% worth the watch for under $6. Remember, if you go to the theater, it's like $20 just to see one movie. So yeah. Synopsis on this one, it's about a woman who's on the run and a woman who's after the woman on the run. And I don't want to go too far into why, because that's kind of a mystery of the film. It's kind of what's happening like first thing in the film, that okay, this woman's on the run and this woman's after the woman on the run, but for quite some time you don't know why. You have no idea what's actually happening. Like, you're seeing in front of you, okay, this makes sense. We're seeing all these events. She's running, she's after her, and all the things that happen. But why? Like, the question is why. And when they finally get to the why, that starts to give a lot more context to the film, obviously. And it leads to the big payoff at the end of the film, which I think is pretty nice. So I don't want to give you too much synopsis-wise, but it is horror. It's like thriller horror. And yeah, that's about it. Trust me, it's good. The opening sequence has a very anxious feel that gives you the idea anything could happen at any moment, and you have no context about where you are and what's going on. So I think that was a very effective way of just like throwing the audience in when something's already going on. Like, there's no context, but you feel the tension between the score, the acting, and just the cinematography and what's going on the screen story-wise, the location, all the atmosphere that they create with that. You're just feeling kind of like anxious and confused, and like, I have no idea what's happening and what could happen. And that is good for mirroring what this character who's on the run would be feeling at that point. So it was very smart filmmaking in that sense, and I think there's a lot of that type of stuff that goes on, which is very important for a story like this, because they wanted a lot of emotion to be baked into it, and they do a really good job of getting that emotion in it, and therefore making audience members be able to feel the same emotions that should be felt or are being felt by characters in the film. The acting is pretty good. Big shout out to Haley Aaron, who does a particularly good job. She plays the woman on the run. I think her name is Jessica. When she doesn't say much, she conveys a lot, I wrote down. She does a phenomenal job. In the beginning, she doesn't talk a whole lot. Actually, she doesn't really talk a ton throughout the entire film because, focusing on being on the run. But when she does talk, she does a really good job. But when she doesn't talk is when I think her performance is even more powerful. Now, obviously, part of that has to do with all the other elements of the film. The script writing, like I said, the shooting locations, the score, the actual cinematography, all that stuff. But at the core of it is Haley Aaron's performance, and she sells it extremely well. Great facial expressions. You get all of the emotions even without her speaking, being nervous, being on edge, being scared. All those things come through very clearly. There's some really heavy life stuff in the film that can be pretty depressing. Also, it can be triggering, so I do want to give a trigger warning to people about suicidal ideations. That's not a big core thing to the story. It is something that comes up in the story, so it's not ruining anything about it. But warning, suicidal ideation is in there. So, and then just in general, like, once you understand what this story is and what it's really about, that can really stir up some emotions as well, because it is meant to be emotional. It's meant for people to really identify with it. And I will talk about it, spoiler thematic wise at the end of this review, but I'll let people know ahead of time, so you can turn this off if you want. Absolutely no spoilers going in. So, for the longest time, you know what's happening, but you don't know why it's happening. And that's the thriller element of the film, obviously. And they do a really good job of keeping you engaged, keeping things moving. For the most part, the pacing is quite good. I do think it slows down a decent amount once they hit between the 45 and hour mark. I think it started to feel a little bit repetitive, a little bit too slowed down. But overall pacing, pretty solid in my opinion. Always looking for that in films, especially a film like this that's supposed to be a horror thriller. But they do a pretty good job of keeping things moving, and that's important when you have this question in your head of why is what's going on going on. You need to make sure that people don't get bored before you're answering that question, because obviously once that question gets answered, it's gonna hook people even more, and this film does succeed at doing that. Once the core of the story is revealed, it hit me in a certain way because it's scary for sure. This is, I don't want to say too much more, but this is a film that spoke to me in a certain way, and I think it will for a lot of people, based off some things that people have gone through, which obviously I'll talk in the spoiler thematic stuff at the very end, but yeah, it really did hit me when I found out what this was actually about, and it really made the film feel a lot more high stakes and a lot more scary. Like I said, like, it kind of felt scary to me, and you'll understand why if you watch it. Also, if you just know me as a person. There's some good gruesome stuff that does pop up. Not a lot. They don't go heavy on the gore and the practical effects and stuff like that. But when it does happen, it looks really good. I mean, it was screen ready. They did a really nice job with that. So whoever was in that department, it's a big success. The score is over the top. This is one of my issues with the film is the composition's good. It's nothing like elaborate. It's nothing that really hits me as being like a particularly awesome score. It's a good score. It's just the way it ends up being used. It's one of those things where they're beating you over the head in certain scenes where it feels like the filmmaker is trying to scream at you and grab you by the hand and yank you in a direction that you already know you're going. So that's why I'm always for way more restrained scores, and this score is unrestrained. It is off the chain. It's ridiculous. It's too much, in my opinion. The ending is tough. I'm just going to say that in certain ways, but it is very impactful. Like I've been saying, they wanted a lot of emotion baked into this film. They succeeded in that, so that would lead you to believe that it's going to make you feel things by the end of the film. And I think the events that they had play out at the end of the film were really good. I think the way the actors pulled it off was great. And what it says story-wise and how it relates to people is wonderful. So that's the big thing that really bumped me up in my rating of this film, which I'll just go ahead and give to you right now, because then after that I'm getting to the spoilery thematic stuff. Out of 5 stars, half stars in play, I'm going to give it a very solid 3.5-star rating. This is a good one. I definitely do recommend checking it out. So before I get to the thematic stuff, real quick, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. That's your best way to support me. I do appreciate that. Hit the thumbs up on this video and any video I put out to help me out with that YouTube algorithm. And then hit the notification bell button if you want to know when I'm putting up new videos. That out of the way, I'm about to start the spoilery thematic stuff, so people, you can stop this if you don't want to know. This film obviously plays heavy on recent fears of COVID and another potential pandemic. Now, according to scientists, it's not a question of if there will be another global pandemic, it is when, and what will it be, and how severe will it be. That's scary stuff. So when you're putting that in a film, and people have gone through it, that's kind of hard. It brings up feelings, I personally, there are things that I was totally fine with during the pandemic, and there were things that really, got to me. It's when I had some of my worst mental health times. And I know a lot of people went through that. So, yeah. The other thing is, this explores the very conflicting concept of individual life pursuits versus greater good, which a lot of people, I don't think a lot of people struggle with that as like an actual thing in life, but I really think that it is something that if you really are faced with it or you really in depth think about it, it is a very hard thing to wrap your head around and a hard thing to feel good about in any way. And I think they capture it really well in this film. So that's one of the big reasons that I bumped it up. Because at first I was like, oh, this is like a 3-star. And then like they hit me with the ending and I'm like, okay, yeah, let's go up to 3.5 for sure. Didn't make the 4, but it's a good film, especially first feature film for Rosman. I mean, come on. Really good. Interested to see what this individual does in the future. But everyone, thank you so much for taking your time to watch this. Please let me know your thoughts on this film. You can put it in the comments and you can do spoilers. That's fine. Until next time, though, keep it brutal.